Welcome everyone to Safety First Curriculum Training webinar. I'm Tracy Nguyen and I'm the training manager at the California School-Based Health Alliance, and I'm excited for you all to learn about Stanford Reach Lab's Safety First curriculum today. So before we head into the content piece that our presenter has prepared for us, I want to make sure we're going over some introductory as well as some housekeeping slides to just make sure we're on the same page. So before we start, I want to make sure we're thanking our funder. So we gratefully acknowledge the support of the California Department of Education Tobacco Use Prevention Education Program for this project, and the contents do not necessarily reflect the position or policy of the CDE. Moving on to some general housekeeping items. To respect the privacy of all of our participants, we do not allow AI note takers in our presentations. We will be recording this webinar and we will share the recording and presentation slides in a few days, so please hang tight for that. If you have any questions throughout today's webinar, please feel free to put them in the Q&A tab located at the bottom of your Zoom menu bar, or you can put them in the group chat as well. And then we'll be answering the questions throughout the webinar where possible, where it makes sense, but also we do have a dedicated Q&A time towards the end of this webinar. So if you have questions, again, put them in the Q&A tab and in the group chat, and we'll definitely get them to them by the Q&A time. And let's move on to a webinar agreement. So you all have seen this before. It's part of our registration page, but I just wanted to share it again. And so the very first one is please be present and ready to learn today. Also, please communicate respectfully. And then finally, contribute to a learning environment that strengthens our advocacy and allyship with young people. And if you don't already know about CSHA, or the California School-Based Health Alliance, we are a statewide nonprofit organization dedicated to improving the health and academic success of children and youth by advancing health services in schools. And so really, our work is based on two basic concepts. The first one being that healthcare should be accessible and where kids are, and the second, schools should have the services needed to ensure that poor health is not a barrier to learning. And really, we do this through capacity building, technical assistance, and providing workshops and webinars like we are doing today. And so if you're interested in learning more about us, there is the link inside the group chat that you can go ahead and click on, where you can find recordings, slides, and additional resources. And if your organization is not already a member of ours, please consider joining us. There are certain perks like conference registration discount, as well as technical assistance tailored to your organizational needs. So there's the QR code that you can scan on the slide, or there's also the link inside the group chat that you can also click on. And so for today's objectives, by the end of the Stanford Reach Lab Safety First training, attendees will be able to explain why it is important to include a harm reduction approach in a comprehensive drug education curriculum for youth. Attendees will also be able to recognize the impact of discussing e-cigarette use, cannabis, and school drug policies in a harm reduction focused drug education curriculum. And so before we dive into the content piece our presenter has for us, I want to make sure we're going over some general statistics to help us understand why CSHA wants to highlight Stanford Reach Lab's Safety First curriculum in the first place. And so according to the National Center for Drug Abuse Statistics, nationwide in 2023, we saw 7.2% of teenagers between the ages of 12 and 17 reporting substance use within the last month. And of that percentage, about 84% of them reported using cannabis. And so comparing that with California number, we see similar percentages with general substance use within the last month, but slightly higher percentage of usage of cannabis. Okay, and so here are some additional data points from Cal Schools for the state of California for the year of 2021 to 2023. So on the left-hand side, you see current tobacco vaping among youth in grades 7, 9, and 11th, and those in continuation schools. And on the right-hand side, it's current marijuana vaping among the same age and school type groups. And so what we see here are that they're very similar, right? And the trend here is that the older youth and those in continuation schools are more likely to be vaping. And so all of this is pointing to the need for harm reduction. So according to a journal article, about 2/3 of young people under the age of 21 who co-use tobacco and cannabis reported nicotine e-cigarettes being their first tobacco product. And another journal article reports that 1/3 of all US high school students have ever used cannabis in their e-cigarettes. And so, like the first webinar or first 2P webinar that you may or may not have attended, the data shared is meant to act as a backdrop to why we are focusing on another one of Stanford Reach Lab's curricula. And really, we're seeing that co-use of tobacco and cannabis is on the rise among young people. So we as adult allies need to do what we can to support youth, to prevent them from using, reduce their harm if they choose to use, and help them stop use when they make that choice. And so, with that, I'd like to go ahead and introduce Juanita Greene as today's presenter on the Stanford Reach Lab Safety First curriculum. So, Juanita is from the San Francisco Bay Area, and she's dedicated to improving health promotion resources for youth, especially in under-resourced communities. She uses innovation and insight to develop effective educational materials. And when she's not working on health promotional projects for the Stanford Reach Lab, she also leads educational training sessions for the lab, serving other educators, counselors, health professionals, and parents who are committed to community health prevention and interventions for youth. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Juanita. I'm also going to stop screen sharing here and switch over to our Canvas slides for today. Awesome. You can go ahead and take it away now, Juanita.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Tracy. I want to say thank you to the California School-Based Health for allowing me to present today. It's an honor to do this. And welcome to Safety First Curriculum Training. Next slide, please. So in the chat, please, share your name, your role, your position, and what brings you to a harm reduction curriculum. I'm always curious to know where are people coming from and what brings them to harm reduction. Next slide, please. So we'd like to give a special thanks and shout out to our sponsors. Without them, none of this would be possible, being able to provide these trainings, as well as our educational materials free and available online. So thank you to them. Next slide, please. So the goals of this training is to go over safety first curriculum, including Reach Lab's resources, our philosophies on drug education. We will dive into why a comprehensive harm reduction approach to drug education is essential, and participants will be able to become familiar with safety first lesson materials, particularly e-cigarettes, cannabis, and zero tolerance lessons. Next slide, please. Before we dive into this training, we always like to ground ourselves in the land acknowledgement as well as the labor acknowledgement. So here we start with, we recognize the Stanford land. Stanford sits on the ancestral land of the Moegma Ohlone tribe. This land was and continues to be of great importance to the Ohlone people. Consistent with our values of community and inclusion, we have a responsibility to acknowledge, honor, and make visible the university's relationship to Native peoples. And here's our labor acknowledgement. The United States was built on the exploited labor of kidnapped Africans, and our country's culture, economic growth, development stem from the labor of enslaved Africans and their descendants, who suffered through transatlantic trafficking, chattel slavery, and Jim Crow. We honor this labor, recognizing that our nation was established by enslaved individuals brought from Africa and their ongoing contributions of their descendants. We also acknowledge all migrant indigenous labor, including voluntary, involuntary traffic forced and undocumented individuals who continue to contribute to our workforce. Next slide, please. So some of you may be new to the REACH Lab and may wonder, like, what does REACH stand for? So REACH stands for Research and Education to Empower Adolescents and Young Adults to Choose Health. And we most definitely work tirelessly and effortlessly to put REACH in the REACH Lab. And I'll tell you how we do that. Next slide. So this is a bird's eye view of our team here. We are a collective of a diverse group from different backgrounds and interests and educational experiences. Here in the top left corner, we have Bonnie Harper Felter, who's our PI, professor, and toolkit founder and director of the Reach Lab. We have postdocs, we have trainers, we have graphic designers, folks who work in outreach, drug specialists, Marcia, who runs our youth action board, grant writers, psychologists, public policy lawyers, you name it. We have everybody here who contributes to what you see today in our curricula. Next slide, please. And then another great shout out to our Youth Action Board, in short, YAB. The reason why we say Action Board because they do more than just advisory. They actually help us lay down the groundwork of what we want to include into our curriculum. So they help us with curriculum development, research development, advocacy. And they also are just really young, brilliant people who are doing great work with health promotion and peer-to-peer education. So great shout out to them. And so, even though we're here today, the main topic of the hour is safety first, but we offer way more than safety first. And I'm just going to touch on that briefly. So, we offer a tobacco prevention toolkit, which houses different curricula or different lessons that we offer. One curriculum that we want to offer or highlight here is You and Me Together Vape Free, which is available in elementary, middle, and high school. It's also translated into Spanish. Mostly focusing on e-cigarette and nicotine use. 5 lessons on brain development, body effects, media literacy, environmental factors, as well as stress coping and wellness. Then we have cannabis awareness prevention toolkit, which houses Smart Talk. Same setup as the You and Me Together Vape Free. 5 lessons from brain development all the way to stress coping and wellness, available in elementary, middle, and high school, also translated in Spanish. And then we have Safety First, which is a comprehensive drug education harm reduction curriculum. I will get to that as we move through this training today. And then we have Healthy Futures, which is a self-paced or group-led alternative to suspension that focuses on either nicotine or cannabis when students are found or caught with substances on campus. Next slide, please. So before we talk about why we are here with just we want to learn more about safety first, we got to get to the root of why do we need a harm reduction curriculum? And this is where we take that step back and we examine and unfold what does that mean when we're talking about harm reduction and why is it needed? And the reason why we need a harm reduction curriculum because we need to go something that's beyond just say no. And we understand that we want to meet students where they are at. And so this is why we are creating something that is more interventive than just focusing on preventive. And so we start to think about, well, why do teens use drugs? What brings young people into that decision making of, hey, this is what I want to do. This is what I feel like I need to do. And so we start to unpack that and thinking about, well, what are some motivations? What are some barriers that contribute to teen substance use? And this allows us to dive deeper into harm reduction and why is it needed in a health educational space. And so we look at substance use on a spectrum. And I think this really creates a space of non judgment and meeting people where they're at. So, understanding that everybody falls on this spectrum, whether they have never used, or they are experimenting, or they are in misuse, or if they have a physical dependency. So, going into a space, kind of having that understanding that some people may fall differently on this spectrum depending on what substances you're talking about. This makes this conversation more inclusive and more inviting for young people to say, hey, this is where I fall, and this is where I identify within this spectrum, and how can I gain some resources to protect me and make informed decisions. And so by doing that, we put ourselves in the shoes of teens. What are they experiencing? What are they contemplating when they are making decisions? And so allowing ourselves to put ourselves in their shoes makes us be more heightened, be more aware of how we can make our curriculum more person centered. And so, making our stuff more person centered, we have to look at life in a more of a duality aspect. And how do young people weigh up their values based on their decision making? What are the perceived benefits and what are the perceived risks of engaging in substance use? And even though, young people might be informed or you're like, I gave them all this information and they still will proceed with engaging in substance use, this is where we kind of understand the scales of what are the perceived benefits of engaging in substance use and allowing us to move away from scare tactics and telling young people what their values should be and understanding and packing, well, this is what you value. You may value social acceptance. You may value, having a calm energy. Some people engage in substances because they're stressed and they're trying to self-medicate, right? Then those risks maybe outweighed, right? Those benefits might be like, okay, well, having friends and having fun and feeling normal among my peers might be more important than the risk that might come to it, which is like some substance use dependency or having making decisions that you may regret later, engaging in other risky behavior under the influence. And so this allows us to create a non-judgmental conversation with weighing up the risk and benefits in a factual way than value based. Next slide, please. So there are both real and perceived benefits of using substances, and we put that in the centerpiece of what we're talking about when we're talking about harm reduction because we understand that, hey, young people will engage in substance use or they may feel pressure to engage in substance use, even if there are information out there that tells them to do otherwise. And so, what are the perceived or real benefits of engaging in substance use so that we can move away from scare tactics and get to the root of why young people may use, which is really focusing on values than just, okay, you're going to die or you're going to get addicted if you engage in substance use. And so when we think about that, we're talking about like, for example, tobacco, where some perceived benefits could be like it tastes good or there's a buzz, it's a cooling feeling. They feel more confident or they feel less nervous or anxious. For example, if you're talking about psychedelics, maybe they're looking for a spiritual experience or answers to existential questions, access to truest, highest form of self, a break from painful connections like trauma, and address or cure mental health challenges. In the chat, I want you guys to share what are some perceived benefits that you guys are aware of or that you guys heard of, and we're working with young people about engaging in substance use. Next slide, please. And so here are some other reasons why, escape stress, peer pressure, to feel inclusive. Yes, fun, it helps them relax. Absolutely. All of these are great examples. Life can save abusive home. Yeah, yeah. All of these are great examples and that we discuss and that we include not only in our trainings, but as well in our harm reduction curriculum. And so here are some of the other things that we also recognize why young people may engage in substance use flavors, right? Especially when you're talking about the nicotine e-cigarette industry. They really push flavors onto young people in regards to enticing them, say, oh, I want to try that cherry flavor or that berry flavored e-cigarette pen, right? It's easy to conceal. There's actually a company that's called Hyde, HYDE, which kind of implicitly implies that, hey, you can hide these substances and they make them in a way that you can conceal them. Sometimes they look like lipsticks or they look like pens or they look like a USB cord. We also talk about marketing, right? And how marketing is targeting young people. Access, right? So being able to buy online, buy from school, buy from family members. The accessibility makes it more alluring. And then the misperceptions, and that also ties into marketing, right? How is substances being portrayed within their community, within their environment, within media? Stress, right? A lot of young people are dealing with heavy situations, heavy experiences, and they're looking for ways to also, what I see in the chat, to escape, to feel better, to numb those feelings, right? And then social determinants of health, talking about what are systemic barriers, whether that's racism, whether that's homophobia, whether that's transphobia, whether that is immigration, right? Xenophobia, not providing health care for folks who are not, doesn't have citizenship, right? All of these things are systemic barriers that contribute to why somebody might engage in substance use. Next slide, please. Another thing that we want to highlight here is peers, right? So there's this idea that there is a social norm that everyone is doing it, and even saying no is hard for a teen. And talking to teens about how to resist peer pressure, right? What are some strategies when you are in situations that are presenting temptation. How do you navigate that and stick to what are your values? What are your exit strategies, right? We all need to practice those and rehearse those. I know I do sometimes. And now being a mom, I always like, oh, I have to go. I gotta get my kid or do something with my family, right? But as you're young, especially when you are focused on social acceptance, it's really hard to figure out if that is going to be a negative outcome if you do resist substance use. Next slide, please. So, this is why we create person centered education. It's based on how adolescents learn and make decisions, it's based on factual science. It's about keeping teens safe and empowering them to make informed decisions and meeting teens where they are at. In the chat, I want you guys to also share what are some perceived risks in regards to saying no? What have you guys heard within your community? What are some perceived risks in saying no? Next slide, please. So as you guys are sharing your ideas and your perspective, yeah, being bullied, absolutely. I'm going to talk about our goal is to normalize drug education, communication with teens without normalizing drug use, right? Just based on what you guys are talking about, social isolation, feeling less cool or bullying, right? We need to normalize drug communication so teens have strategies and have core information that can help them make informed decisions, right? When they're encounter these situations where they feel like it might be a perceived risk if I do turn down this experience, right? They can go back to their toolbox and say, hey, this is the information I have, and this is what's going to support me in making that decision and being brave, right? Next slide, please. So these are the reasons why we need a comprehensive drug education that includes a harm reduction lens that goes beyond just saying no and looks at drug education communication as more of a discussion, as a dialogue rather than a confrontation, right? Next slide, please. So this is the safety first kind of principles, the do's and don'ts, right? So what safety first does is see sobriety or no use as an essential or primary strategy in reducing drug harms, empowering teens to make healthier choices through accurate information, and that recognizes some teens will try drugs and encourage teens to take steps to reduce the potential harms of drug use, right? Either cutting back or quitting altogether. And then what Safety First does not do is encourage or condone teen drug use, teach teens how to use drugs, or judge teens who may engage in substance use. So now we're getting into the meat of this training. And so here we are talking about a comprehensive harm reduction based drug intervention curriculum, Safety First. So, Safety First is comprised of 13 lessons. We have core drug lessons, which is our on alcohol, fentanyl, opioids, hallucinogens, or psychedelics, and other drugs like stimulants, nicotine, cannabis, right? And then we have other supporting lessons that are also very important, but they're not core drug lessons. So, we might have a lesson on brain development. We have lessons on stress, coping, and wellness. We have lessons on media literacy, school drug policy, right? That you may want to couple with those core drug lessons that are relevant to your population. As we recognize, every teacher may not have the capacity or the bandwidth to get through all 13. So you might do a little bit of take and teach that is most relevant to your classroom. Next slide, please. So now I'm going to go through each lesson and kind of give you a short synopsis. And then if we have capacity to do so, I will take you guys through a live walkthrough. So this is lesson one, Introduction to Safety First Education. And basically this lesson is all about breaking that ice, really talking about the implicit biases that we hold about substance use. So this is an example slide here, which is I will learn too. This is an example of a learning objective. It's coined in the first person. So if I was an educator, I would call on a student and the student would read it as this. I would learn to define drugs and understand there is a wide variety of drugs that people use for different reasons. Drugs for medical purposes, illegal drugs that can hurt us, and even caffeine use. And then here is lesson two. Lesson two is keeping you safe, reducing your harm, and overview. And so, in this lesson, students will learn to recognize in ways in which drug use may potentially harm me by exploring the following, right? Health related harms, academic harms, legal harms, and social emotional harms. Students will also identify the harms and real and perceived benefits of drug use and establish key harm reduction strategies to not use or reduce harm if already using drugs. So you will see a lot of the harm reduction strategies introduced here that are going to be sprinkled throughout the core drug lessons. So I think this is a great lesson to open up with if this is a new concept that's being introduced to your school, to your classroom, to your school district, right? What is harm reduction and how we're going to approach it in this lesson? And then we have lesson three, drugs and the youth brain. And so, next slide, please. This lesson, what we discuss is the general information about drugs, how the adolescent brain is unique. I like to pause and highlight this that we really coin brain development in a more empowering and affirmative language. A lot of times when people talk about brain development, it can be patronizing or as if you're kind of dismissing or belittling, young people as like, oh, your brain is not fully developed. You don't know. But actually, what I say is brain development is like your superpower, right? I'm in my mid 30s and I have my database. I have to really stretch to get more information to expand my mind and to change my perspective. Where someone who is experiencing brain development, it's easy for them to adapt and change and be able to open their mind to different concepts. So I think that's an excellent skill and a superpower to have. And that's how we coin it in this lesson. Students will also learn about the adolescent brain, how it reacts, including tolerance and withdrawal, and why is it hard for young people to quit substance use once they start engaging in it, and why is it easy for them to um, um, gain drug dependency, and then different problems associated with drug dependency during adolescence. Now, this is lesson four, stress coping and wellness. Shout out to the Youth Action Board. We have worked in collaboration with the Youth Action Board. They said, hey, we need skills, we need strategies about how to cope with stress. We don't have any stress management tools. And so we worked in collaboration with the Youth Action Board to come up with this lesson to provide stress management resources and tools for young people to engage in. And so, what students will learn in this lesson is the difference between positive and negative stress. So, looking at life in duality, that we have things that stress us out in a positive way that motivate us, and we have things that stress us out that feels toxic and very heavy, right? And then we also talk about how to identify healthy alternatives of coping, right? I think that's a very important skill to really highlight because sometimes that's not always modeled in our environment, maybe from our teachers, from our parents, from our neighbors, from extended family members. How do we manage stress? And then we also talk about what individual strategies to reduce stress that works best for me, personalizing stress management tools. And then now this is where we start with the core drug lessons. This is lesson five, stimulants. So in this lesson, students will describe stimulant drugs and their general effects on the brain and the body, understand the real and perceived benefits of and harms of using stimulant drugs, and be aware of the importance of using harm reduction strategies if stimulant drugs are used. You're going to see this the same setup for each lesson. So once you kind of know how to navigate one or two lessons, you're going to know how to navigate all of them. We're always going to start with drug knowledge. Then we're going to talk about this duality of what are the perceived benefits, what are the perceived and real risk of engaging in substance use, and what are some harm reduction strategies. Lesson six, e-cigarettes and vaping. Just a quick pause here. If you have, if you're noticing there's a lot of e-cigarette use on your campus and your community, I highly suggest checking out You and Me Together Vape Free, which it has a more robust curriculum, 5 lessons that dive deeper in this topic. But if you're looking for something that just lightly touches on it and you just want to be able to talk about some of the health effects and a harm reduction approach, this is a great lesson to tap into. Okay, next slide. All right, so students will learn to the harms and the real and perceived benefits of e-cig use, about the harmful chemicals in e-cigarette aerosols, not just water vapor, and how second and third hand smoke can be harmful to others, and how my heart, lungs, and other body parts are affected by e-cigarette use. Lesson seven, same message. If you're looking for something that's more in depth, more robust, I say check out Smart Talk, 5 lessons that goes deep into this topic. But this is also a fantastic lesson that you can just, hey, let's have a conversation. Let's build on this. And so, in this lesson, what students will do is identify the various methods of cannabis use, explain the real and perceived and potential harms and benefits with cannabis use, and how to utilize harm reduction strategies. Now we have lesson 8, alcohol and other depressants. And the way this lesson is set up is that we first start with depressants in general, and then we end or close with harm reduction strategies that are pertaining to alcohol. So if you're looking for an alcohol-based lesson, this is your lesson. And students will learn to describe how alcohol and other depressant drugs affect the brain and the body, identify the real and perceived harms and benefits of using alcohol and other depressant drugs, and advise myself and my peers who are using alcohol and other depressants on harm reducing behaviors related to alcohol use. And then we have lesson 9. If you're familiar with Safety First and you've been using it, I highly suggest going back to the website. This lesson has been updated recently, maybe the last month or two or so. So we have a lot of great updated information in lesson 9, which is fentanyl and other opioids. And similar to lesson 8, it starts off with a general aspect of opioids and then closes into fentanyl exposure and how to reduce harms if you have been exposed to fentanyl. So, what students will learn to describe what are the real, uh, describe what opioid drugs are and their general effects on the brain and the body, identify the potential harms and real and perceived benefits of using opioid drugs, and recognize and know how to respond if signs of opioid overdose. I think this is a great lesson to couple with lesson 5 too, because lesson 5 is all about stimulants, and then this is about opioids. And a lot of times, what we're seeing is that there is fentanyl exposure with stimulant drugs. And so, if you want to talk about this intersection between stimulant drugs and the harms that it opens to fentanyl exposure, I think that's a great lesson to segue into. And then we have lesson 10, hallucinogens, or also known as psychedelics. Also, this lesson has been updated as well. So, if you have been using Safety First, I highly suggest going back to our website and making sure you got the latest version. So, what students will do is describe the general effects of hallucinogens on the brain and the body, identify the harms and the real and perceived benefits of using hallucinogens, and then be aware of specific strategies to reduce harm from hallucinogens among those who are engaging in hallucinogen use, right? And we really harp on set and setting, right? Making sure that young people are aware of their emotional and mental state as well as their environment when they're engaging in hallucinogens or psychedelics. Now that we have got through the core drug lessons, so from 5 to 10 are the core drug lessons, and now we're going back to more supportive lessons here that are also very important that can guide and engage that conversation about substance use, but we're not talking about any substances in particular. So we're talking about lesson 11 here, media literacy, so understanding the portrayal of drugs. And so what students will learn to is define media literacy. What does that mean to be literate in media, right? Identify relevant information with credible resources. So we do the CRAPS test. We teach them about media literacy skills that they can help them demystify, deconstruct commercial ads or just substance use that's portrayed in the media in general, whether that's through movies, TV shows, even clothing, right? And utilize media and social media responsibly as a tool to keep me informed and safe. So understanding that media is a tool to keep us informed, not just for entertainment or consumerism, but also a way for us to navigate information. Next slide, please. And so now we have lesson 12, zero tolerance, understanding school drug policy, which is a really important lesson. I think this is a lesson that you could even couple with healthy futures, which is our alternative to suspension. So this lesson really talks about what is zero drug tolerance and how does that impact your academic well-being if you are found with substances on your campus, right? Next slide, please. So students will learn to define zero tolerance drug policy, explain how school drug policy can impact students' health, and academic well-being, analyze the impact of different school drug policies. So this is really tapping into the alternative to suspension approaches and more restorative approaches that are rooted in social justice, right? And healing, right? And getting to the root of what's going on, then focusing on the symptom, right? And then identify alternative approaches to improve students' health and academic well-being. And then this is our closing slide, looking back, looking forward. So this is a lesson where it's more reflective. Students get to write a letter to themselves, revisit harm reduction strategies that were discussed, revisit stress coping strategies that were discussed. Next slide. So, as it says here, let's review what we've learned, right? So, the first thing is that we will discuss what do you think is a drug now? And it kind of plays on lesson one, where we talk about myths and misperceptions and implicit biases that we care about substance use. After experiencing the safety first curriculum, what is it that you think now about substances and drugs, right? And then the next thing we'll discuss is what do you know about drugs? What is the knowledge that you have gained from experiencing safety first? And then the last point here, number three, is what else do you want to know about drugs? Which is what we talked about earlier, which is normalizing drug communication, drug information exchanging, and education, right? It goes beyond just safety first. Let's continue this conversation. Maybe we can have a question box in the classroom. You're like, hey, I want to know more about this. Or can we do a school project, a positive youth development project where we can explore more about this? Continuing that conversation. So that is safety first. Now we're going to talk about ways that you can use the curriculum. So we recommend that using the lessons as they are, but we recognize each classroom has different needs. So the reason why we say that because our curricula is evidence-based and evidence-informed, right? Evidence-based meaning that you can use this curriculum the way it's set up in any setting and will have the same outcome. And we're also evidence-informed, meaning we're constantly updating information to make sure it's accurate, to making sure it's relevant, right? But you can also change the way that you want to change an image on the slide, or if you want to include different stress coping strategies, right? In lesson four, if in the marketing lesson, they're like, oh, we don't really see those ads in our neighborhood. We want to put different ads that come up. You can most definitely do that, but don't veer too much away from the content. You also can use the slides and share them resources with students or parents. You can have students lead peer-to-peer learning, right? And we just ask, do not remove or change any of our logos that you see at the bottom here. Now we're going to talk about the data dashboard. So we collect data information in our curricula with a pre and post survey. We do not collect like any sensitive information like your name, your age, we just want to know like what lessons have they experienced, and what kind of knowledge that they've gained and how has it changed their intentions to use, right? And so you use this QR code in the bottom right-hand corner to learn more about the data dashboard. If you are an educator, you would set up a data dashboard first, and then you would use that teacher's code for students to fill out their pre and post survey. And I'll go into more of that in the next slide. So here is an example. So once you make a teacher's code, you would sign up, right? If you don't know if you're going to be the one administering the lessons, you can sign up as an administrator and as a teacher, and you can share that teacher's code with the folks that are going to be actually administering the lesson. They'll have that teacher's code, and that teacher's code is what you'll see that students will have. So say, okay, you start on lesson one, you'll see the embedded QR code to start the data dashboard. Students will type in that teacher's code because it links it to that classroom or to that educator. They'll fill it out. And then when they say they end on lesson 13, right? They do all 13 lessons. They have a embedded QR code in the last slide of that lesson, and they use that same teacher's code to fill out the post survey. Now we're at the fun part. We're going to do the live walkthrough. And so this is our Stanford Reach Lab website. Um, on the landing page, it's pretty much everything that we talked about today in this training. Why a harm reduction comprehensive drug education, um, And who is the audience? The audience is for high schoolers, but we do know that some people do use it for middle schoolers and some people use it for college. And we're actually currently developing a college app that can be implemented in school for orientation. So when students are just starting college, they are going to experience safety first. So that's very exciting. Um, and so you see here, you can talk about the pre and post surveys, and these are different tabs here. So we have introduction, we have the parent letter. Um, if you want to send a letter home to parents so that parents know what their child is engaging in, or if their guardian wants to know what their child is engaging in, you can send that home to bring in more parent involvement and parent awareness. As we know that it's really important to have parent buy-in, because sometimes parents think that harm reduction is like allowing your kid to smoke weed in the basement because it's safer at the house than in the street somewhere, right? And we really want parents to be aware of how their decision making can impact their young people's decision making as well. So, if you keep scrolling, you see the first safety first do's and don'ts, all the stuff that we talked about earlier in this training. Please scroll up. Then you go to resource and infographics. I like this section a lot because I call this like my passive learning. So if you want to put stuff in your office, in the hallways, in the school bathrooms, or where you find that where substance use is frequent, or where substance exchange, right? It's teens selling substances or exchanging substances. You might want to put them in those areas so students can see those visually and say, hey, this is the information. Now, some stuff is for educators and parents, and some stuff could be really good for students. I think it's really up to you and what you know would be beneficial to your population and the group that you're working with. And then we have using Canva. If you run into any trouble about how to set up a Canva account, just check that out. Or you can reach out to us at the Stanford Reach Lab, and we can most definitely give you a demo or walk you through how to find things. And then here is the fun part, lessons. So this is lesson navigation. You will find all 13 lessons here. You can access the lessons in two different forms. You can either click on the square box, or you can click on one of the red tabs that says view lesson 7, right? And it will take you to lesson 7. And so what it will do is give you the learning objectives, the national health standards that connected to that, and a little short synopsis at the top about what the lesson's about. If you want to view the lesson, you can view it on the website. You can click through it. The thing is that you're not able to see the teacher talking points, but you're able to see the slide sequence just on the website. So if you're like, I'm just browsing, I just want to see what is offered here. This seems like interesting. This might be really a useful tool or resource for my community, and I want to show my colleagues, or I want to show my district. This is a great way to kind of just lightly dive into it. But if you want to like, okay, I'm ready, I want to really look at this lesson, you can say click here to view on Canva. And so when you click here to view on Canva, you're going to say, it says view template. So I view template. Okay, and so open it in editor. And now this is my own copy, right? And so when it says, okay, copy of lesson 7, or L7 is lesson 7, this is my personalized copy. This means that I can change the title. I can now look at the notes. If I click on the notes section on the left-hand corner on the bottom, um, you will see the teacher's talking points. Now you know what is discussed on per slide here. These lessons are free and available online. So if you are done with this training, you're like, I'm ready. I want to jump into this curriculum. I want to jump into lesson 7. You're more than welcome to do that without our permission. But if you would like to have insight, or like, I want to kind of tailor it a little bit more to my community, you always can reach out to us and we can talk about how we can do that with you. Can you scroll down, please, a little bit more? Yes. And so what each lesson has is a Kahoot. And this green tab here, the Kahoot will be, this is our answer key. You press make a copy and you can view the answers. Each Kahoot game is embedded in all the lessons, and it's towards the end of that lesson. Go back to the safety first page. Then we have a facilitator's guide that talks about what to expect when you are experiencing this curriculum, whether that's discussion guides, whether that's a Kahoot, what ways that you can talk about harm reduction, what is harm reduction. You can do that. You can go back to the website. Then we have the teacher's talking point slide chart. This teacher part taking teachers talking slide chart, a little bit of a tongue twister. My apologies. This is a really good tool for like note taking or teachers prep or student prep. So if you have students that follow along on their personal devices and they have questions, they can make notes and comments about it. Or if they want to build their own peer-to-peer lesson, they can use these teacher talking points and reimagine these lessons in a peer-to-peer lens. You can use this as a teacher's prep to figure out, okay, this is where I want to add this. This is where I want to maybe take out this part of the talking points. It can help you better prepare and take notes. So we have that here as a resource to you. And then we have discussion guides. So discussion guides, you can use this to further the conversation. Normally, what we do use these for is for parent involvement or guardian involvement, but we recognize that some students do not have a trusted adult in their life at home that they can talk to. So you can be that trusted adult in your classroom. You can have this as a classroom assignment, or you can even have students do it with another peer or friend. But really, it's kind of like further the engagement. But if you want to do like a pre and post survey, like if your school is skeptical, you can use the discussion guide and the Kahoot as a pre and post to gauge if this is really working, right? Or are students really comprehending? Is it changing their perceptions and their minds about substance use and motivation of substance use, right? Or intentions to engage in substance use. Okay, now we can go back to the presentation. And so I will close out here today with ways that you can keep in touch with us on social media. You can find us on X, which was previously known as Twitter. We also are available on Facebook and LinkedIn. A cool thing is that we have a youth action board Instagram. So if you have youth who are interested in following other youth and understanding their perspective on health promotional materials, have them follow. Yeah, or you can follow us on Instagram as well. Thank you guys so much. That QR code in the middle is for you to sign up for our newsletter, and that is our email, stanfordreachlab@stanford.edu, if you have any questions for us. Thank you so much. And I'm here to answer any questions.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Juanita. I know there was quite a few questions that popped in, so I'm gonna try to go in order. So I'll go ahead and share them with you. And then Juanita, if you can answer it, that'd be great. So yes,
Okay.
please put your questions in right now. We're gonna have quite a bit of Q&A time, so this is amazing. So the first question we saw in the chat was, are the students on the youth action board in high school?
Yes. We have a mix between high schoolers as well as college students. It starts with age 13 and it ends with age 22.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Juanita. And then in our Q&A tab, we had a question here and it reads, research was a bit controversial on harm reduction before. Do we have a more recent research supporting harm reduction versus abstinence techniques?
I believe so. There's a lot of content out there, and you guys can also evaluate it. That's why we use the data dashboard to kind of help guide that conversation of, hey, is this useful? We're going to be actually writing a paper using our data dashboard evaluations to support that harm reduction is needed in these spaces. So yes.
Awesome. Thank you, Juanita. And then there's a couple questions actually about the more comprehensive lesson on e-cigarettes and cannabis that you had shared. So you want to share a little bit more of the curricula, and I will try to drop the link into the chat. But if you have it ready, please feel free to drop it into the chat as well.
Of course, yeah. So we have You and Me Together, Vape Free, which is available in Spanish. We also have other culturally translated, which is Northern Ireland, Hawaii, right? We're also translating it for Vietnamese. So this is a really cool 5 lesson curriculum where it talks about brain development in regards to nicotine use, and then also the body effects, how it affects your lungs, your heart, when you're engaging in e-cigarette use. And then we go into environmental factors. How does e-cigarette affect our environment, whether it's our waterways, the plants, dogs, cats, our families, right? Then we go into media literacy, talking about media messages that are targeting young people and trying to get them enticed with, hey, e-cigarette use, it's normal, it's fun, it's safe to use or safer to use, right? And then we land on stress coping and wellness, where we talk about stress management strategies, because a lot of young people engage in nicotine use because it helps them de-stress. And so we recognize that and we put that in the lesson. And then the same thing with the Smart Talk, which is a cannabis-based curriculum where we talk about, brain development, body effects, and we look at it through inhalation and digestion. So looking at it from, okay, are you smoking cannabis? Are you eating edibles, right? And how does that impact your brain and your body with THC levels being very, very high? And we talk about environmental factors, but in a different standpoint, talking about smoking cannabis or engaging cannabis use in multi-unit housing. So if you're smoking cannabis and you're living in an apartment, how does that travel through the vents and the pipes and the walls? And how does it affect your neighbors, right? And then we talk about media literacy. There's a lot of targeted messaging around cannabis use, especially for LGBTQ plus youth, youth of color, whether that's Black, whether that's Latino, whether that's Asian, women, right? They are targeting people, and we want to talk about how is that happening. And then, we talk about stress coping and wellness, and how to move away from cannabis use and find alternative ways to balance stressful situations.
Awesome. Thank you, Juanita. And in the time that Juanita was sharing all that great information, I was also dropping in the links to all the different curricula that she was talking about. There is a general like curricula landing page as well that will direct you to all the other toolkits that Stanford Reach Lab has and all the other curricula that they have created as well. So feel free to navigate through that and look through it. Let's see. And then there were several questions about are the slides available? If you're talking about the slides from today's webinar, yes, they will be available to you all. We'll send it to all registrants in our follow-up email. Please hang tight for a couple days. Let us like work our magic a little bit here on the back end and gather all those resources for you so that we can share the recording and slide deck with you all. And if you're talking about the slide deck that Juanita was sharing earlier during the live demonstration, it's all within the website, free of charge, free resources for you all. Okay, so let's see. Another question. So, how long do these lessons typically take to deliver? And is there a suggested cadence of delivery?
Great question. Yeah. No, the lessons usually take about 50 to 60 minutes. We want to use for like one class period. And it really depends if when you go through the lesson, you know your population, you know your audience. What would be good information? Sometimes people like to break up the lessons. Some people like to take the activities and start with the activities first to kind of break the ice and create more of a playful environment before diving into more serious topics when we're talking about substance use. So yeah, you can most definitely go straight into the lesson. Depends on what's your capacity, how much time do you have, and what is your audience ready for, right? And I think that can help you decide how you want to deliver the lesson.
Awesome. Thank you, Juanita. I think those are the questions that we were able to capture. I'm going to give it another 30 seconds or so. If there's any other questions you want to pop into the chat. In the meantime, I do want to make sure I'm sharing our closing slides. We still have time for questions, though, so please enter those questions in, and we'll still have another section for Q&A, essentially. So let me go ahead and share my screen real quick here. Share. Okay. I'm gonna go ahead and slideshow. Okay, so I do want to make sure I'm sharing our upcoming CSHA webinar. So today is actually our second 2P webinar out of our three. So the next one's going to take place next week, actually, on October 14th. It's called Effective Youth-Driven Substance Use Prevention in Schools. So if that is of interest, please register. It is going to, all the links to these webinars will be inside the group chat for you all to register, whichever one you're interested in. But that webinar will highlight best practices for youth engagement and feature a case study from continuation school's successful efforts on prevention efforts and also intervention efforts. So if that's of interest, we hope to see you all there. And if aside from 2P topics, you want to learn about other things as well, we do have a Protecting California Students Supporting Immigrant and LGBTQ plus youth during challenging times webinar. And that one will focus on the shifting landscape of LGBTQ plus and immigration related issues affecting youth and families. That's going to take place on October 23rd. And then October 29th, we'll have our certified wellness coaches, voices from California's new wellness support profession. And that webinar will share how wellness coaches provide non-clinical preventive and also intervention services. So again, if any of these webinars of interest, we hope to see you all there, and registration is possible through the link in the group chat. I also want to share additional resources with you all. So from webinars to guides and briefs, CSHA has quite a few resources on alternatives to discipline. So feel free to check out our website for these resources. I know Juanita shared a little bit about their school drug policy module in the Safety First curriculum. So these could be additional resources for adult allies within your school and within your organization as well. And all these again will be shared in the follow-up email, so please hang tight for that. And if you have any questions, we'll still take questions now, but if you have any further questions after this webinar, please feel free to reach out to either Juanita or myself. Our email addresses are on the slide right now. And as you exit out of this webinar, a short pop-up survey will pop up on your device, and we ask that you please fill it out for us so we can continue to improve our webinar for the future. But with that, we will continue to take questions now. If there's any other questions, I'm going to check our chat right now and our Q&A tab. Let's see. I don't see anything else popping up right now. But if you have any questions, please let us know. And if not, thank you so much for your time today. We hope you learned something and this was a helpful resource to you all. Again, please reach out if you have any questions at all. Thank you so much, everyone, and please have a great day.